I'm Bethany.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome to the Healing Collective podcast, where we explore the paradox of healing at the individual and the collective level.
Join us as we invite guests to share their personal paths to freedom. So today you meet Adrienne Johnson. She's a friend from working in North Lawndale. And something I just really, I appreciated her just humor and her way of being, but I also deeply appreciated the simplicity. She just made life feel so simple. It all comes down to unconditional love and showing up for our people and not giving up, and relationships. And sometimes this podcast, it's fun for us to get really intellectual and really heady. And I really appreciated like the simplicity and the groundedness of her perspective.
Mm-hmm. And I just loved her life story that is so different from mine, and I learned so much from just listening and sort of being along her path and her story of the way she's talking about the way her life has kind of happened and what's gone on. I loved it. She was fun. She was flirty. She had me and Lauren laughing, and she holds life lightly while doing really important work in the world. And I think it's beautiful.
So my name is Adrienne Johnson. How do I describe myself? I'm a daughter. I say I'm a triple threat. I'm pretty smart and funny. My life's work is to help young people, to help them figure out life, kind of walk out life with them. So currently I'm doing that at UCAN. So I work at UCAN as the Vice President of Violence Intervention and Prevention Services. I think that's, I want to impact change and create healing in North Lawndale, where, in the community that I live.
And Lauren, is that the same place where you live, North Lawndale?
Well, I don't live in North Lawndale, but that's where my school was and where I worked for so long. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. And a lot of my kids went through Adrienne's program. That's one of the ways that we are connected.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. So that was a big part of, I know how much you do with kids and how much you think about healing and what violence prevention, how that's connected to healing. And so I'm excited to talk about, if it comes up, like your journey and what you've also learned from supporting the healing of other people as well.
Okay.
What would you say brought you into that field, or that knowing that you wanted to be of service to kids and support them in that way?
So I knew early, I might have been like 23, 24. I was on an extended college plan. And I said to my dad, I might have been maybe about 23. Can I stay in school because I want to teach? And he said, well, you should probably teach journalism because you need to graduate. And so my undergrad is in journalism. I knew I would never use it because it just wasn't what like it wasn't what I wanted to do. When I got to the end of that journey, and my dad just said I had to graduate, so I did what my dad said. So I knew from early that I should be teaching, and I didn't. And then I moved. So I grew up in Inglewood, West Inglewood in Chicago, and moved back to North Lawndale in the house where my mom grew up. So I live in the same space where my mom lived as a kid. And I fell in love with the space. Coming back as a teenager, I thought it was kind of dumb. I was like, these people. But being here and I say the people in North Lawndale are probably some of the nicest, most hospitable people I've ever come across in my entire life. They're going to speak to you. They're going to ask you, who do you belong to? It's like, what do you mean? Who do I belong to? And they're asking that because they know people. So, when my neighbors ask me, who do you belong to? And I'm like, oh, I'm Miss Hudson's granddaughter. Oh, you Doris's granddaughter. So, like, things like that made me say, I really like this place, right? I'm glad we moved back. And so I started working with young people, and it's a crazy story. So there's this boy who lived on my block. He was younger. I think at that time I was still working at Encyclopedia Britannica. I would come home and kind of sit on my porch to kind of get the gook off, right? And he would come and sit on my porch too. And I was like, why is he sitting here? Like, I don't want to talk to him. I hope he doesn't want to talk to me. Um, so I would just let him sit, and I would sit, right? And then eventually we started talking, and I would ask him questions about going downtown. Has he seen the fireworks? Like, all of those things that my mom would do with me when we lived on the South Side. Like, we always went to the fireworks. We always went to Venetian night. Like, we always did those things. We went to the zoo. Like, we always did those things. And I didn't do it it wasn't my field trip, if you will. So I wanted to do those things with young people. And I was like, well, ask your mom if we could go see the fireworks. And she was like, I don't care. Who is it? It's Michael Hudson's niece. So that's kind of how I started. That's kind of how I started in the space, just loving on young people. And
There's like a noise.
it's my dumb dog. Can I put her in the cage?
Of course.
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, she's special.
What kind of dog is she?
She's an American Staffordshire Terrier, so she's a big dog. So she's scratching on the carpet so that she can lay down.
Oh, I see.
Just a weirdo. And of course, just right here at my feet.
Right now at this time. Yeah.
Right now at this time, yes. So yeah, that's why that's kind of how I started doing this work. I really thought I would be working with girls, but I'm not. I mostly work with young boys.
It sounds like you've really surrendered to like what life's been inviting you into. Like, you've kind of been like, what? No. And then just something presents and you're like, okay. And then you kind of start to dig it almost.
Totally. That's really how I'm like, I'm going to go with it. So I always say I'm not smart enough for the things that pop into my head or the opportunities that, I'm not, that's never me. That's always God, I think. So I just want to kind of be obedient, and it's not easy all the times. A lot of times I'm like, that's dumb. I ain't doing that. But then it's almost like I'm like shoved out, like, get out. And I'm like, oh, okay, like now. Okay, got it. So I just
Right.
kind of go with it. And I think what I've embraced most in the process is that, my job is to do what God says. His job is to figure it out, like how it goes. I just need to show up and do what he says. So I just show up and do what he says.
That's like it's a state of consciousness, I think, that is like learned. And my experience is that when we're fighting against what's happening all the time, like, life is a lot less friendly, but if we can learn to ride the waves of what seems to want to happen, whether it's, a plan, of like, yeah, like God's plan or the universe's plan, or something else. Like if we can ride those waves and go with what wants to happen, I think the more we're able to adopt that and roll with that and learn how to be with those, like riding that, it seems like life gets friendlier and friendlier when you can just go with it. Is that your experience? Like as you've sort of surrendered to each thing and just gone with what was being presented?
Yeah, I think it is easier if I don't think about it, right? So sometimes, things will happen and you try to get in front of them because you're like, "Oh, we're going this way. I know this way," right? And you try to get in front of it and you're like, "Well, when did we turn? Cuz I didn't like this is not how it's supposed to, like I thought we was just going to go straight down this way and then turn when we got to the normal street. Like nobody said it was a side street in here. So I when I get in front of it, it's always it's always bad, right? And then I have to, oh, okay, just, make a U-turn, Adrienne, just go back and, just follow, if you will.
Say that where you're like, oh, we're going this way. I want to get ahead of it. I'm like, oh, we're going that way. I don't want to go that way. I'm going to try to get ahead of that way. And I'm going to try to get us over here before we go too far that way. And it's weird because I consider surrender one of my highest values. And I think in general, I have a gift of surrender and letting it flow. But when I'm in resistance, those few times that I'm in resistance, I am in big resistance.
Yeah. I don't know if I see, and I think I'm cautious too. So I'll go, is that you, God? Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know if that makes sense. Like, should I do that? Like, like, okay, then if that's really you, right? This, like, help me understand, like, for real, if this is you. And then it's like, sunshine, that's not even your idea. Like and I don't want to say that but a lot of times, like the stuff that I'm doing or the stuff that I do, I'm not smart enough. I'm not brave enough. I'm not any of those things. Like I, I am an introvert to the core. If we could have did this podcast with my camera off, I would have.
I mean, you are free to turn your camera off if you don't want it on, to be real.
Okay. My I'm having technical issues. I apologize. I had to just plug my computer up. I thought it was plugged up, but my dog's probably kicked it. I'm probably the worst guest.
I would say we've had one other guest where we were like laughing the majority of the time, but not a lot. So I'm it's promising how much we've already laughed.
Okay,
I'm
good.
wondering what the outcomes have been. Like I hear you saying like God is always kind of getting ahead of me and has these plans and then I get on board and then so how's it turning out? Like what's the data show? Like is it God's plan the reliable, trustworthy plan or how do you feel about the outcomes?
No, I don't. So I ask for stuff, right? I'm like, I just want North Lawndale to be safe. Like, I'll say that, like, just big and broad. Like, I want it to be safe. And so then when those opportunities come, I'm like, okay, that's a lot. And then I become like, I become a little bit overwhelmed and I have to kind of come back in, process, and then I'm ready to come out. But I think they're okay. I don't want to say that I hate it, but it's what I asked for.
Yeah. Oh,
So if it's what you ask for and it's provided, you got to show up.
man, that's the medicine. I knew I was like, because I wasn't sure we were going to have this podcast, where I wasn't quite sure. And then I'm like, I hear from you and I'm like, this must be the medicine I need today because that's what always happens. And I am in high resistance to my reality right now. And I can also see that it's what I asked for, and I can also see, but right now I'm like, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. I'm like, I did not want it to go this way. So I totally hear that and feel it.
I just noticed that, like, asking for something like, I want North Lawndale to be safe, you can do that and then not take the invitations to go and do like anti-violence work. Or you can engage fully in the process of like, oh, I asked for this and now I can play an active role in it. So it's like taking responsibility for creating the reality that you want to see. Because people can ask for a lot of stuff and not take the invitations and then be mad that they don't, they're not getting stuff, So I just think that's, yeah, I think that act of surrender is really beautiful.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I don't know if I never even thought of it as being as surrendering. I never even thought of it that way.
Yeah, just like allowing, just like
Yeah.
stepping into what is presented without resistance. And I hear sometimes you're like, wait a minute, and you pause and you're questioning, but like ultimately it sounds like you've been sort of following this path that's been laid out for you, and that the values of that path that got laid out for you really line up with one of your highest wants and longings, which is like safety.
Mm-hmm.
Safety in your community, which is like a beautiful thing to stand for.
Right. And it's not a small thing. Like I think about people who like, maybe they're like, God, bring me a car,
Yeah.
It's like, when we pray for, I guess, when we pray for things like that, like safety or freedom or, and not just for us, but for other people, like God or the universe, whatever it is for you, has got to do a lot of like reorganizing to support intentions like that differently than if it's just something that, is kind of simple or very self-focused.
Yeah, like I notice a real clarity because a lot of people want a lot of things that they don't even realize is in service of safety ultimately. Like they think it's about this thing, but what's underneath it, like that core need that's driving a lot of people's wants in life actually is safety and security to some extent and like love. And so I like that it just feels very clear. Like it's cut down to the heart of a thing that every human being desires. So it's like a very beautiful and relatable and relational place to be devoted to. I mean, who doesn't want safety?
Yeah.
So like what a thing to stand for.
When I think of, so I look at it in terms of how communities are laid out, or even growing up growing up in Chicago, like I always felt safe in my community. And even when I walk around here, people are like, you walking? I'm like, well, yeah, I think I'm gonna walk today. I just feel, what I mean? Like I feel safe. I don't feel like somebody will come knock me upside the head and take my purse. I just don't feel, what I mean? Like I don't feel like that. But I know there's so many people, so many young people, so many, just so many people who would never do that. And when you look at the city and you look at the Lincoln Parks and the Wicker Parks of Chicago, right? And people are walking their dogs at midnight. I'm like, I want to walk my dogs at midnight. It's like I want to do like, and I don't think that should be my reality as well. I probably pay more taxes than them, so I should have the same safety and the same luxuries of living like they should have in my space.
Well, it sounds like you're saying you're unwilling to exist in a permanent fear state, and that you're choosing to engage your community and create a psychological safety for yourself to some extent. Like, I'm going to walk today, and I'm not just going to be in total fear of the place I live all the time, and I'm going to choose to trust and that you're not naive and you're not walking the dog at midnight. Like, you're being smart, but like to the highest capacity that feels safe and aligned for you, you're choosing to trust your community and creating enough safety in yourself and what you feel like is safe or not safe to do, that you can go and live that and be it, which is like another really aligned way to like move towards your goal. Like, you can create safety in Lawndale literally within your own state of consciousness, and choose that over and over again. And
I'm curious what you think about that, Adrienne. What do you think about when you hear that?
I don't know if I was creating my own space of not being fearful. I'm just like, I gotta go to work. My brother and I are sharing a car. He has it, and I'm not gonna take an Uber. So it's like one of those things, like, you just have to do it, right? So I've never looked like, so when you say that, Beth, I'm like, oh, wow, that's so like, that's kind of how I'm like, wow, that's good. That's good. Because I've never thought of it that way. I've just never.
Well, and I might be putting stuff onto you too, like, and I mean, I guess with like the details, I guess at some point, if you really felt like it was too unsafe, it would be worth it to take an Uber or whatever, right? So like, you're kind of
Right.
saying, yeah, like, you are making a choice about it at some point, and then being confident in your decision, and like, yeah, that's a state of consciousness, I think, even to just be trusting yourself to make the right decision. That's good for you.
Yeah, and I also just kind of, I'm like, well, I gotta walk, so I just believe that God is gonna take care of me. And I'm like, okay, you're gonna be taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. If it's people out on the street, if it's, guys, and they I've walked past groups of guys and they're like, hey ma'am, how you doing? And it's probably because my hair is gray, and I'm like, thank God for gray hair, right? So I'm not, you know what I mean? So it's almost like, oh, and I probably could be somebody's, because they're young, I probably could be their grandmother. And I'm thankful that they're not cutting up, if you will.
Well, I'm also thinking about perception because, I think I worked in Lawndale for like 15 years and I did not feel unsafe. And I experienced it as the most communal experience I've had in my life. Like, I think there's a part of us that always craves community and always believes that's a thing. But like, that wasn't really I didn't connect to my community growing up. And I was in awe. Like, I lived in Bronzeville. I didn't feel community there. Didn't feel like my neighborhood. Like, North Lawndale felt like it. And there's so many people in so many systemic relationships. And I just think about, it's true that unsafe things happen there. That's not, we can't argue with that. But I think so much of the stories we tell about things create people's, perceptions. And, Bethany, since you don't live in Chicago, like when Adrienne's talking about like Lincoln Park and someone walking their dog at midnight, there's a different story that's told about that neighborhood. And, what I hear you saying also is like, we pay the same taxes. Why aren't we having a similar experience of safety? And is there something bigger, more systemic going on, right? Around the way that we tell stories and share resources within the city.
Is Lincoln Park like fancy or something, or like, what is it, like a wealthy area?
Mm-hmm. It's like a very privileged kind of situation. I mean, I don't want to perpetuate any other story, so I'm just gonna leave it at
Situation.
that. But, all right. Chicago is one of the most segregated cities. When I moved there, it was second to Johannesburg, Africa.
I think
Wow.
Boston's pretty segregated too.
Yeah. And growing up in the South, like, there's a lot of overt racism, but you're not separated. There's a lot more like everyone's together. And so when I went to Chicago, I remember being like, this is so different. And then people that live in Chicago, there's so many different pockets of the city they've never ever been. It's like, oh no, Chicago is just this to me. And so it's just a really unique, I think, Chicago's a unique experience in that way.
Have you always been in Chicago, Adrienne?
Yeah, I've lived here my entire life. I thought so. My mom had a stroke in '04, and before that, I was really thinking hard about going to New York, moving and living in New York. But yeah, she had her stroke, and so I never left. I think I'm good. I think I'm good with that decision. And New York is not friendly to people in wheelchairs at all. Their curbs don't go down. So yeah, we visited my mom and and I was like pulling her up, popping a willy on her wheelchair. She's like, "You're gonna kill me." I'm like, "No, I'm not."
You're like, no, I'm not, because we're not going to move here.
No, I'm not. And then you'd have some New Yorker, "You need help." I'm like, "Please." And they would, help me get her up to the next block with the next curb. I was like, this place is terrible.
I know Lauren knows about your work and the programs that you run, but I don't know much about it. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about the programs that you work on?
Yeah, so we work to prevent violence in 3 communities: North Lawndale, which is 4 miles west of downtown Chicago, um, Roseland, which is on the south side of Chicago, and then Riverdale, which is right on the other side of Roseland. And so I have a pretty big team of about 70 people. And we work with young people who will either perpetrate a violent crime or become a victim of one. And so what that works really looks like is us walking out life with them. That's what I call it. We walk out life. Some people will say we mentor them, but I think it's really more than that, because we have some coaches who young people are, like a part of their families, right? We're driving young people to school. One of our coaches drove a young person to Jackson, Mississippi, because his family was like, "I don't want you to go away to school." So it's like, wait, what? Like, rent a car. Like, if he wants to go, he's 18 now. It's his decision. Let's rent a car so that we can get him to school. We show up in court for them. At the birth of babies, we're at the baby showers. Like, there's so much more than just, that 1 hour, a couple of hours a week mentoring. When they call, and they call all the time, especially, well, young people will call you if they trust you. If they call you, their expectation is that you show up, or you walk them back from whatever is happening. But a lot of times they want you to show up, and we show up. And, this population of young people are often creamed off the top, right? So in programs where they are working with young people, this population of young people is often creamed, and they don't receive services. They don't, nobody is helping them or really care about their well-being, if you will. And that's probably just the lack of a better term. But they're a hard population to work with, because you have to keep showing up. And oh gosh, and the pool is a lot. But once you get it, you they'll walk to the ends of the earth for you because they know that you'll walk to the ends of the earth for them. So, I mean, I never thought that I would be working with young boys, but I absolutely love them. And there are so many who I'm like, man, if I didn't live on 16th in St. Louis, you would live with me, because I know that I could expose you to different things and you would be good, because you're such a solid kid. You just didn't have somebody to kind of keep you in the lines, if you will, like I had, or my brother had, or some other young people have. So yeah, it's amazing work, and I work with people who um, have been involved in some way in the same types of activities that the young people have been in, are participating in. And so they're even, it's one thing for me to say I've never, been involved in any type of, illegal activities, things like that. I haven't been to jail. It's one thing for me to say, hey, you might not want to go to jail. You might not want to do that because you're going to go to jail, right? It's something that is a horse of another color for somebody who has lived that experience to say, let me tell you what it's like. One of my coworkers says, for you to smell what you just ate, and because you're in jail, and whatever comes out, that's what your lunch, you smell it because your bathroom is in your cell, so I'm like, oh my God, that's a terrible, like, that's it's like it's a good way to explain jail. But when you think about it, it's like, oh my God, I'm never going there. Right. So,
Motivating.
right. It's like, I don't think I want to, no. And not just you, but the two other people or the three other people, depending on the size of, and the overcrowding of that facility, ate, you smell what they ate too. So it's like, his story is going to be way more credible than what I have to say. Mine may be a little more motivating, it may be softer. I'm going to talk about your strengths and things like that. He's just giving you like the for real, this is what it's like. And when you go in there, you're going to be sorry.
So you're basically providing consistent support in places and communities and individuals that don't have that, or don't have as much as they should or deserve. And then their response to that, having a consistent piece of support, is that they learn how to be consistent, because then they are in relationship with you in a consistent way, right? Like, you're able to teach them how to. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Like,
yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. When you hear a young person say, I learned how to be a dad from, this person, and you're like, well, he don't even have kids. So how could you be, but he's showing up for him, and he's looking at him as a father figure, and that consistency, and not, belittling him, or, and things like that, is what he's taking and bringing to his babies. So I think it's awesome, and that is exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, I want to give an example of, so the very first, I had like a handful of boys I was really close to, and they were definitely struggling. So let's say I was maybe 4. And that's when I got connected to UCAN. And I'll never forget one of the mentors coming to one of their parent meetings. And let me explain, parent meetings in schools are very often like the parent and the principal and the teacher kind of all going at the kid, or being like, and they think they're motivating the kid, but they're actually just kind of reinforcing negative messages. And so this coach comes and pulls up the chair next to the kid, and like it was just like so symbolic of like, I am here with you and for you. And I just remember watching my students sit up taller, and then some of that engagement, I mean, a lot of the work I'm doing now has been so formed by the experiences that I had in that school. And working with UCAN really taught me like the level of support and agency that we can offer kids. And that when what I saw is like when a kid feels like you're standing beside me, right? You're not standing over me. You're not talking down to me. You're not judging me for my experience, but you're standing beside me. Like how much more community is possible. Um, and like, even if I track that now, like it's changed my parenting, because the way that we show up with children in general, I think is like, we know way better than you. And we're just going to tell you how it is, or here's right and here's wrong. And this like punishment cycle. And I think what my students really taught me is that my students had as much to teach me as I had to teach them. And we were kind of in a partnership together, and we were co-creating like what works for everybody. And that's really changed my parenting as well. But I just really can track that moment when I saw that UCAN coach like pull up next to the kid as like a really shift moment in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a lot of that. We, I can think of two different scenarios. So we had a young man who was going into, and I mean, he met his coach his sophomore year in high school, and their first interaction was the student literally turning over desk, like just flipping them because something had happened and he was mad. He's flipping desks. So he comes in, he's like, knock it off. I'm like, this is not my kid. Like, I'm not about to work with him. And so they develop a relationship. And that sophomore year really, was affected his GPA, right? So his senior year, the coach comes and he says he's going to college, and I was like, okay, well, let's get it. Like, if he said he's going, let's go. So now they have you fill out all of these college applications. You have to fill out 10. I think it's like 10 that is a sure shot. Some I know I'm not getting ins, and then like some middle of the roads or something like that, right? And so he filled out. He wanted to go to Jackson State, and his GPA was like a 1.9. That was his cum, and they were like, uh, you know, and the school. I was like, this is like, you got to sell him like new snakeskin shoes. Like, you gotta, because you know him. You know exactly who he is. You know what I mean? Like, his sophomore year was a bump in the road, and it could make or break what happens. So in his letter on his application, if he has an interview, like whatever happens, you have to coach him like you're Gus D'Amato and he's Mike Tyson. Like, you got to coach him like that. So he shows up and he's ready. And he's a senior. Like, he's going into his senior year at Jackson State. I'm like, that type of stuff is the reason why I continue to, you know what I mean? Like, why I continue to show up. And I mean, and we've lost young people, and that's incredibly difficult. Young people get shot, they go to jail, they make awful decisions, but their decisions are not them. And I think that's why it's so, I'm not going to say the work is easy. No, the work is easy Well, the work is not easy because sometimes it is difficult, but me being able to get up and go every day is easy because I know that they are very different than what the choices that they made. And I think when they get creamed off the top, people are taking their choices and making that them. And that's not who they are at all.
Maybe it's a simple job to do, but not easy
Oh,
necessarily.
yeah, that's
But it's
good.
like for you to get up and show up the way, like it's simple, but not easy.
Yeah, it is. It's very simple, but it's not, you're right. It's not easy because there are days when I'm like, there's some real bull corn right here. There's some real bull corn.
I've never heard bullcorn before, but I'm going to use that.
Yeah, that's my best friend's word. She says bull corn all the time.
I was going to ask, and I feel like you were kind of moving there, like what you've learned about healing by working with your kids.
So years ago, and the Sun Times, and I don't know if they had it in your newspapers, but the Chicago Sun Times, and I think they still have it. They have this little comic, and it's a Love Is comic, right? And so I was dating this dude and I was collecting them and I was so cute. I would put them in cards and give them to him, right? And so this one time I gave him this love is, and it says, love is believing in someone until you can believe in yourself. And out of all of the love is that I cut out on a regular basis, that is the one that I remember, right? And so I really have always connected that to him. That love is believing in someone until they can believe in themselves. And I was like, hmm. Um, but it's really for the work that I do. It's connecting, not just with young people, but community as a whole. And I and I think sometimes in North Lawndale or Inglewood, any community of color, we kind of sit like this, like we sit with very close to us. Like I'm not, I could let you see it, but nope, not gonna do it. So we're always here, right? And I think loving people and just loving them unconditionally allows them to just kind of let you see what they have. And showing up lets them see that you love them regardless. Oh, you went to court for having two guns in your car. I don't care. I'm glad you didn't get hurt. I'm glad the police didn't, I'm like, there's nothing, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just want people to understand, like, there's nothing that people can do. Like, it's like, there's nothing that you can do that's going to make me stop loving you. I mean, like, you would literally have to come to my house and push my mom down the stairs. Like, okay, I think that would be, you know what I'm saying? But
Right, that's the line.
but I mean, and even then, I would be very mad at you and I probably stop talking to you, but would I stop? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But I think when people understand that, and not just young people, oh, she's dependent, she's solid. I can come and ask her a question. She's not going to judge me. She's going to be fair. Like those things, I think that's what I've learned. Like those things are like showing up in that way allows me to show up to just kind of help in however way I can. And I don't want anything in return. And I think that that's healing for me because I just, you mean like I just want people to be their best. Like you know what I mean? Like it has really nothing to do with me. It's me just wanting them to be the best. If I see that you're hurting, how can I and it's not everybody, so I don't want to seem real pie in the sky. It's just really people that I'm connected to, and especially young people. Like if I could love them back to life, sometimes I say to my boys, I'm like, I'm just gonna hug you to the ground because you look like you need a hug. You know, I'm like, I'm just gonna hug you. I said to one of our boys yesterday, I was like, how's so and so? And he was like, he all right. I was like, please hug his neck for me. He was like, that's weird. I was like, he was like, hug his neck. I was like, yeah, hug his neck. He was like, no. I was like, okay.
Well,
Well,
that
it
goes back
sounds
to kind of the simple part too. Like, I mean, like there's these core human needs, right? Unconditional love and acceptance, physical touch, like is and how sometimes our stories about people or things they do or decisions they make actually lead us to be like, no, everybody else deserves those needs to be met, but maybe not you, right? And like
Mm-hmm,
how that's such kind of like a societal sickness in a lot of ways that we have internalized that message in some ways. Like your decisions, to me, the whole prison system represents this belief that if you make certain decisions, your basic needs just barely deserve to even be met. You know,
mm-hmm.
when we know that humans need exactly what you're pointing to in order to heal. So it's like, you made a decision that makes you unworthy of access to the things that would support you to heal the most.
Yeah, yeah. And and the greatest thing I think is that they love you back.
well, your way showing. You're like, this is
Yeah,
how it looks. This is how it
yeah,
looks to end blame and judgment and to be unconditional and to be consistent and to open your heart. And maybe some people don't have a lot of way showers on that. And so you're showing them how to do a thing, intentionally or not.
I don't think you've got to show people that. I think that it's natural when someone loves you a certain way, it is our most basic nature to love back. So it is way showing in that often in a relationship, someone's got to love first, right? Because especially if two people are hurting, or like to your point, we're
mm-hmm.
covering, we're protecting, somebody's got to go first. But I think that our most highest and basic nature is that kind of love. And so when someone reminds us, they make it available, it just naturally emerges.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, I think I think all people want to be loved. But I think young people who make mistakes really just, you know what I mean? Like because sometimes I think they don't even think they're worth it, right? And so, and they do it. They do love because they love their crew, their boys. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, anytime you with somebody and somebody says, this just went down, we need to go back, and you're immediately on board, you love that person, right?
Mm.
If my best friend called me today and said, I killed my husband, I'm immediately on board. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna be asking her a bunch of questions as I'm putting on my shoes, driving to go get her. I'm gonna be like, I gotta get off the podcast because I got an emergency, right? So I'm immediately on board, and we're trying to figure it out, right? So I mean, they know how to do it. They just don't always get it from adults. Yeah, their crews are, the people who they're connected to regularly, who feed them, who sneak them into their house, in their houses if when their parents are asleep. Like, they love those people and they love them back. You know what I'm saying? Like, they love them. It's just that, when the mother wakes up and finds out that I snuck Lauren in, and I say, well, she ain't have nowhere to go. And she said, well, she can't stay here.
Right.
It's the mother who don't love Lauren. I love her.
But I think that's so real. Like I think that's a really untold story about kind of like, there's all these narratives about even kind of like gangs or things like that. But just I would continue to see like there's this loyalty, right? And there's this communal agreements of, and we get our needs met and we support each other to get our needs met, because some of the people that we depended on who were supposed to support us to get our needs met did not show up, weren't there, left me to figure it out by myself. And so me and a bunch of people my age, we found the best, fastest, most efficient way to get our needs met with the tools and things that we had. And it can become an issue because you're 15 making those decisions. So you're in that consciousness, but at the end of the day, there is this like, yeah, the loyalty, and like love is showing up, and love is, you keep having somebody's back, and I think we see that all the time.
Yeah. They just don't have a lot of adult love, or not showing up. And I would never say that their parents don't love them, or grandparents or their family don't love them. But I think, also, just in our culture, like, we're a tough love culture, if you will, so, um, you can't let Adrienne lay around too long. She's 20. You got to figure out what you're going to do. So you got to get out of here. Like, it's not walking me through that. We get to a point where we just show up tough, and we're like, this is what you're going to do if you're not going to do it. And it's a lot of ultimatums. Like, if you don't do what I say, you got to go. You're not going to keep coming in my house late at night. You're not going to bring Lauren here. You want to keep bringing Lauren in here, then you go where Lauren live. Well, that's why Lauren coming here. So, I think families love young people. I just think when they get to a space where it's too much, we just turn to the tough love that that is almost kind of like passed down from generation, to generation to generation. Like, you gotta tell them what to do, and that's not always right.
I think about, so many people on this podcast and them talking about their healing, and a lot of it comes down to their experience with their parents and the adults. That's where their trauma is. I think that there's really something for us as adults, right? And something about, okay, well, there's something I just see in my own kind of journey is like, okay, maybe this is what I was taught, or what was modeled to me about being an adult and what was expected, but is it really working? Did it work for me? And like, is that really what, it's something about just if we're really present to the needs of the people in front of us versus kind of doing the things that we think we should do or that we think they should do. I wonder how we might show up as adults in general.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective. It is very true. My parents got divorced when I was 11. That was probably the most traumatic. And it was probably, it was traumatic for me because I went from going to private school to public school, and I really thought public school kids were ratchet. And so I didn't, it was like, oh my God, these people. Um, so, but I really, they did a really good job at making sure that whatever they had, like whatever their differences were, didn't come down on my brother and I. And then, that was, I had a babysitter, it was just stuff like that. Like, oh, you got to go to the babysitter now. Well, I don't want to go to I like coming home after school. You know what I mean? Like, so things like that, were things that were difficult for me as a kid. And they would say, just suck it up, Adrienne, like, suck it up, and I would be like, oh, okay, got it. But I also think that is, partly the reason I think as, Black people, we do show up like that, because we're, you get a whooping as a Black kid and you're like, stop crying. It's like, you just beat the hell out of me. Why would you tell me to stop crying? Like, that's stupid. So I don't, there is not a lot of space as a young person, as in my household and my cousin's household. My brother was probably a little different, because he's 6 years younger, and I think my mother was just kind of older and like, because I was always asking, I just don't understand why. And sometimes she would, I would I would ask why. She would answer why. I would say that doesn't make sense. Why? And then eventually she would, just kind of shut me down. So maybe about the second, third why I was shut down. My brother was just very different. He could ask questions and maybe he just asked them differently, and he was able to get to get the answers that he needed. Or, but my dad was definitely because I told you so, because I said so. Why can't I do that? Because I said so. And don't ask me again. So we don't have spaces where we're allowed to, I said all that to say, we don't have spaces where we're allowed to kind of figure out, and ask questions. And, in our households, so we can't process. And I think that is where the trauma comes from, right? Because, when my parents did get divorced, my mom talked to my brother, and my dad didn't talk about it until I was probably 19. That's when he finally would talk about it, right? um to me. Now, I don't know if he talked to my brother about it, but he didn't talk to me about it until I was probably 19. But my mom talked about it, but just a little bit, and then it was, we ain't gonna keep talking about this. Like, and again, I had a lot of questions that fifth, sixth grade year, that summer, when they were like, you going to Henderson in the fall. I was like, I know this a lie around here, because do you see these kids that walk past our house? You see them. You. I'm not even cut from this cloth. Like, I don't even know what you're doing. Why would you even think to put me in public school? And I had a couple of months to ask about it, and then after that, it was like, I don't care what you keep asking. I've answered that question. This is what it is. Keep it moving. So
It was interesting when you talk about the kids coming to you. It sounds like you're really thoughtful about hearing them out. You said that they can trust you, that you're going to be fair, and so in contrast to kind of this experience you're talking about now from your childhood, right? Where it's like, we're not going to talk about what happened for many years. We're not going to explain the rationale of why you're going to different schools. It makes sense to me that you understand, from a personal experience, the need for the rationale, the background, the fairness, that you take that kind of time with kids, and maybe it was really also what you needed at the time, do you think?
yeah, probably. I say a lot that adults make decisions about kids and don't consider them. Every day, adults make decisions about children and never even think, how is this going to affect them, right? And so, had I known, or had we talked about, or I had been able to ask questions on the front end, or I mean, and I did have friends that went to Henderson, but I had, it was two, maybe three friends that went to public school that I talked to on a regular basis. Had I been able to to talk about it, and you explain some of the whys. You know, I mean, of course, in a divorce, you don't have to tell me everything or whatever, but just explain some of that so that I can buy into it. Because if I buy into it, then I'm
Right.
not so resistant. You know, those first, my sixth grade year, I was a nightmare to my teacher. She called my name. Her name was Miss Johnson, and she would call me and my best friend. My best friend and I have been friends since sixth grade. She would say Ballard and Johnson, and she had a wig on, and it was all, it was all like ratty and cocked to the side. But you know what I mean? Like, I would have shown up differently. But I was like, I don't care if I go to the seventh grade. Like, this is some trash, right? So I think I explained because I want their buy in. I don't want to make decisions about you and you think that I don't consider you. I want to raise the expectations for you, and let me tell you why I'm raising them. This is what I've seen in the past. This is how you've shown up. So this says to me that you can do this, but you're choosing to do something different. And maybe it's because you want to fit in, but this is what I see. And so this is why I'm doing that. This is why I ask you questions like this.
Helping them understand the why and not just the
Mm-hmm.
what. Yeah. I might go overboard on the whys with my kids, like really explaining everything. And I might be on the other side of that polarity, maybe needing to just, yeah. But so you've been doing this work for a while in North Lawndale and these other two communities. Are things changing? Do things feel like they're changing in one direction or the other?
So I'm always a glass half full type of chick, right? So I don't think they're going lower. I don't see it I don't see it that way. I don't think, we're three quarters full by any, way, shape, or form, but we might be a little over half, if you will, right? But I also know, unsafe communities didn't happen overnight. Communities that have challenges didn't happen overnight. So I can't come in and be like, oh, I've been, in this work for 10 years. I can't understand why I'm not seeing more, right? So, and then
Sounds like it's generational.
I also look at it as I may not see fruit, right? I may not see it get better. My job may be just to plant the seeds and come out and water, and somebody else is the harvester. And I'm okay with that.
That's really something. Like to have a want, to take the invitation to like take full responsibility for bringing the want forward, this like want of safety in this community, to work hard at it every day, to be in a disciplined practice of love and acceptance and guidance for these kids, and to be so steady, and to be totally okay if you don't see it yourself, and to still be like, and I'm going to do this every day. That is really something, because I feel like working hard for something, if you feel like you're going to eventually get the payoff or something, and it's just like not even knowing, like being in the unknown and still being in devotion is like a really beautiful, beautiful thing. That's how it's striking me over here right now. It's just like the beauty of that, and the trust, and yeah. I mean, that's really something, I think.
Well, so what would you say, like, what is your kind of viewpoint on this idea of like collective healing? What do we need from your perspective? You've got the microphone. What is needed for collective healing to happen?
So I read today, and I don't know which phone so there's a lot of things I think. First we all have to, kind of show up in the space of love, right? And so, and I think when you're loving people, however they show up is how is how you take them. um and you just and you just continue to love them until, even if they push you away, you know what I mean, saying like you just kind of keep kind of showing up and loving people. I think there's some accountability, but just self accountability, right? So, and I think you have to be accountable to yourself before you really can start to hold somebody else accountable. And I often think that we as people, we want to hold other people accountable, but we don't want that for ourselves. So, when you point a finger, it's always three more pointing back at you for a reason, so, you know, let's start taking some looks at ourselves and see how we can, change in spaces, how we're showing up, building, real relationships. Everything now is kind of like for the likes, right? Nobody knows anybody. Nobody, um, social has, kind of taken us. Social is great. I'm going to say social isn't great. Social is great. But there's something missed about having like for real telephone conversations. Do you know? So people are real vulnerable on the phone. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you're talking, you're having your a new dude that you're gonna date, your best friend, like somebody who you're, like whatever it is. There's something about having conversations that is missed through social, right? And I think you you can interpret or misread something through social that you would never do in a phone conversation, if you will. So really just kind of figuring out like real relationships, like be intentional about the relationships that you're going to be in. And if somebody is saying, you know, if somebody is not showing up the right way, we have to be intentional and be like, Lauren, are you okay today? Right? And not, Lauren, are you okay?
For the listeners, she's texting Lauren instead.
I text you, I wanted to know if you're okay, right? That can't happen. It has to be something different.
So I'm hearing unconditional love, like consistent, unconditional love, self accountability, and real conversations, connected conversations with people that we're in community with,
Yep.
Or in real relationships, like
and real relationships.
I
Yeah.
wanted to just say, like, I write purpose statements for myself. And the first one I ever wrote was I wanted to love people unconditionally as a teacher. And then the next one I wrote was I want to support people to believe that relationships can be a nourishing and uplifting experience, because I've seen how, I mean, for most of us, our deepest traumas are relational.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are it is scarier to um, be vulnerable and open our heart up to somebody and to take that risk than to jump out of an airplane or even be shot by a gun. I mean, literally, I think it is people's greatest fear. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, we're so relational. We are born into all these relationships, and we all, like, it's our hardest thing. And so when I hear you talk about what you're saying about the collective, like I align to it 100%, like that. What if we really, really were thoughtful and prioritized our relationships? And as someone who has really done that, it is so hard, being relational is so hard.
And it's draining.
Mm-hmm.
So because you have to, you have to show up. Like I am one of those. I am totally mm, mm-mm. And so really just trusting that when I show up, I'm going to be taken care of. Maybe not by that person, but definitely by God. Like I'm not going to be, you know what I mean? Like it's like you don't have to be so, so guarded, right? You know, I am learning to be vulnerable. That's again, that is not a trait that is taught to young Black girls. It may be taught now, but I'm telling you, when I was growing up, it was not something that you did not, vulnerability was looked upon as like if you say that, people are going to take advantage of you. And so, you don't want people to take advantage of you. So you're always showing up very, very differently. And so talking about how I feel, saying, like one of the things that I'm saying, I'm learning to say now is like, I just don't have the capacity to do that. Like, so there would be times like my plate would look like boom, 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 because I wouldn't say I don't have the capacity to do that. I would just kind of figure it out, right? And would be exhausted and upset and all of those things, as opposed to just saying, I'm not gonna be able to do it. Like I'm not, and I don't have trouble saying no. Like that's not. I probably say no more than I say yes. But when things, if my mom asked me something, if my grandparents would ask me something, if my best friend, if something is happening at work, like I'm learning that it's like, well, you can keep saying yes, and you will continue to be overwhelmed, or you can say, hey, I don't really have the capacity to fit this in right now. Can you take this off of my plate? And people, they be pissed off, but I don't care. Your plate is probably emptier than mine. So, and that's huge for me. I was talking to, one of my friends, just about, some things that I was, just about some things that I was feeling. And I'm like, that's a stretch for you, Adrienne, because I sometimes I process things just kind of like in my head, and kind of talk it out. I'm gonna go on a walk. If you see me sometimes and I'm walking and I'm moving my lips, I am talking to myself, and it is a full conversation. I'm having, oh no, you shouldn't, so because I'm processing it, right? Because I don't, it's like, well, will you be judged, or, or things like that. But, I think there has to be a space for vulnerability, and defining that to people so that they don't think that it is, a weakness or a bad thing, or if you tell somebody something, they're going to use it against you, in the past, in the future, throw it back, throw it back in your face. So, I think all of those things have to be a part of the collective healing, yeah.
Well, what I love about your answers is they are simple things. Like at the end of the day, it like if you really get down to it, vulnerability, relationships, unconditional love. Like, that's, it's not
Mm-hmm.
really complex now. But what you said about your job, it's simple, but it's not easy,
Mm-hmm.
and I think actually the things you're calling forward are absolutely ground zero for healing. And I'm just really reflecting on how kind of simple and obvious those things are and how exceptionally, uncomfortable, difficult in practice, to your point. And I hear you talking about, like, I can give a certain amount and then I got to go back over here and be like, am I okay? Do I have, am I overdoing it? Like, it's this dance. Like, am I giving enough to myself? Am I giving enough to you? Is it safe to be vulnerable? Can I take risks to be vulnerable? It's this like reciprocal back and forth. Can I keep showing up for you and still love me at the same
Mm-hmm.
time? But I'm just really struck by your answers being so simple, but also so difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are. Because you're right. They just seem so basic, but to do that, you have to, it's like, oh, okay. Because rejection could come from all of those things. And if you're rejected, you shut down. But I also think too, you have to really, just kind of show up like this isn't about you.
I think that's the hardest. Yeah, with kids for me, it's always been easier, but it's like, that is the strongest place when I don't really feel like I need anything from you, or I'm okay whichever direction you go, or if you can love me or not. That's when I feel the most free in loving. When I want to be interdependent with somebody else, when I want that to be shared, is when it starts to get complicated.
Yeah, that is the complicated piece. But then too, so that just kind of happened to me. And I'm like the me is like antsy and anxious, right? And then the gut, the intuition, like the inside is like, chill, I got you. Like you're gonna be okay, right? And it is, it is like a dance all the time, because if you want to be in relationship with somebody and it's not moving in the direction like you think it should be going, it's like, what the French toast, man? You know, like stop it, so but you have to kind of come, you got to kind of come, kind of come back and almost like reel yourself in, and that's like your own healing, because if you don't, whatever happens out there could really could damage you, you know what I mean, and set you back, and I don't want to be set back. Like I want to continue to move forward, so I have to process things and not and understand, like, I'm like, oh, if that ain't meant to be, okay, great, sweet, got it, I misread it. Oh, it's good, all is well, got it, let's move forward. Good job, Adrienne. It's like a immediate like pep talk, like you got it, it's like I could sit around and be like, I don't understand, like, and that does happen. I'm not gonna say that it doesn't. I'm like, I just don't understand, like, where did I misread? Whoa. But then it's like you're there, and then it's almost like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of thing, because I could be there. Like, how did I misread that? Like, I really thought that this is what I read. Like, oh, like, ugh. Like, but then it's good job. Thank you for the experience, Lord. I appreciate it. I get it. So I don't get stuck because I can't get stuck.
You can't afford it. You can't
I
afford to not
can't.
keep moving forward. Yeah.
I can't. I have to continue to move forward. And I don't want, and if I get stuck, I don't want to get stuck on nothing like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming in for our landing. Is that what you're about to say? We're coming to the end of our time.
And I just wanted to see if there's anything else that you wanted to say to kind of feel complete. Is there anything you came here to say that you haven't said yet?
No, I don't think so. This was a great conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it was great. It was great to see
I didn't
you.
know what to expect, but I'm glad I did it.
You're very animated, and it's very fun.
You are the triple threat.
Oh, thank you. That's what I say to myself. I don't think anybody else said it. I think you're the only other person that has said it.
Oh, you're definitely
When I say people are like,
well, thank you for being on our podcast, and thank you for being some medicine for me today. And just, I just want to, I guess, appreciate the part of you that keeps showing up and that is so willing to love, even if the other person is not available to love you in the same way or give to you the same way. I'm really leaving here admiring that and being reminded of that part of me listening to you. So thank you for that today.
I appreciate it. Thank you all so very much.
Hey everybody, if you've got any feedback for us, we welcome it, or ideas about future guests, email us at healingcollectivepod@gmail.com. Our website is thehealingcollectivepodcast.com. We are at Healing Podcast on Twitter, and we are at Healing Collective Podcast on Instagram. Special thanks to Monda Creative, who edits all of our podcasts, and Two Tall Women Productions, who produce. Thank you.